Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her gloved hand against the cold metal surface of the massive alien vessel. The ship stretched endlessly in both directions, its hull disappearing into the darkness of the asteroid field where it had drifted for millennia. At 3 kilometers long and nearly a kilometer wide, it dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The external structure showed signs of incredible age, with metal that seemed to shimmer between colors that had no names in human language. "Atmospheric readings are stable inside," called out Commander Williams from the shuttle's pilot seat. "Whatever atmosphere they breathed, it's long gone. Your suits will keep you alive, but we don't know what we're dealing with in there." Sarah nodded, adjusting the translation device clipped to her helmet. The Universal Translation Matrix was humanity's greatest achievement after faster-than-light travel. It could decode and translate any language by analyzing patterns and mathematical relationships. So far, it had worked on all 7 alien species humanity had encountered. But those had all been living species with active communication. This ship had been silent for thousands of years. Dr. Chen, her assistant Marcus, spoke through the comm system. "The scans show the ship is completely hollow inside. No crew quarters, no obvious engine rooms, just vast empty spaces with some kind of central chamber." Sarah studied the readings on her tablet. The ship's design made no sense. How could something this massive travel between stars without visible engines or crew areas? Every human ship needed quarters for the crew, storage for supplies, and massive fusion drives. This vessel seemed to defy everything they understood about space travel. "Let's find the entrance," Sarah said, moving along the hull. Her team of 6 researchers followed behind, their magnetic boots clicking against the metal surface. After 20 minutes of searching, they found what appeared to be an airlock, though it was twice the size of any human design. The airlock door was made of the same strange metal as the hull. When Sarah approached, symbols appeared on the surface, glowing with soft blue light. The translation device immediately began working, its small screen filling with text. "Welcome, young travelers. This vessel recognizes your species as calculating human. You may enter, but know that what you discover here will change your understanding of the galaxy forever." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. The ship was still active. After thousands of years of silence, it had somehow detected them and was communicating. "Commander Williams, are you seeing this?" she asked. "Affirmative, Dr. Chen. The translation is coming through clear. But how is this ship still powered after all this time?" Sarah looked at her team. Marcus appeared excited but nervous, while the other researchers seemed torn between scientific curiosity and fear. She had spent her entire career studying dead alien ruins. This was the first time she had encountered technology that was still functioning. "We proceed carefully," she decided. "Full documentation of everything we see." The airlock opened silently, revealing a chamber that seemed to stretch beyond the reach of their lights. As they stepped inside, the walls began to glow with the same soft blue light as the symbols outside. The chamber was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen human shuttles. "Gravity is Earth normal," Marcus reported, checking his instruments. "Atmosphere is... this can't be right. It's showing as perfectly breathable for humans." Sarah frowned. "Keep your helmets on anyway. We don't know how this ship is generating atmosphere or gravity." They moved deeper into the vessel, following corridors that seemed to adjust their lighting as the team passed. The walls were covered with flowing script in the same alien language, and the translation device worked continuously to convert the text. "These appear to be historical records," Sarah said, reading from her device. "Something about the Keepers of Memory and the Great Convergence." "Marcus, are you getting this?" "Yes. And it's incredible. According to these texts, this ship is called the Repository. It's not a normal starship at all. It's some kind of mobile library designed to preserve the history and knowledge of multiple species." As they walked, Sarah began to understand the ship's unusual design. It wasn't built to transport people across space quickly. It was built to drift between star systems for thousands of years, preserving information until someone worthy was found to receive it. The empty spaces weren't failures of design. They were storage areas for vast amounts of data. They reached what appeared to be the ship's center, a massive spherical chamber with walls covered in flowing patterns of light. In the center of the room stood a pillar of the same strange metal, about 3 meters tall and covered in more complex symbols than they had seen anywhere else. "My God," whispered Dr. Yamamoto, the team's xenobiologist. "Look at the patterns on the walls. They're moving, changing. It's like the ship is alive." Sarah approached the central pillar carefully. As she got closer, the symbols on its surface began to glow brighter, and the translation device started working faster than she had ever seen it work before. "Greetings. Human designated Sarah Chen. This unit has been waiting." Sarah stopped walking. The translation had come through perfectly. But something was wrong. The device wasn't just translating now. Something was speaking directly to it. "You're aware of me specifically?" she asked aloud. "Correct. This unit has been observing your species since your first experiments with faster-than-light travel. You have been selected as a candidate for the transfer of responsibility." The rest of the team gathered around Sarah, all of them staring at the pillar. The lights on the walls grew brighter, and new text began appearing everywhere. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "Transfer of responsibility? This unit is the last functioning repository ship. For 3 million years, the repositories have preserved the complete history and knowledge of 4,847 different species across the galaxy. Wars have been fought, civilizations have risen and fallen, entire species have evolved and gone extinct. All of it is recorded here." Sarah felt overwhelmed. The implications were staggering. If this ship really contained the history of thousands of species over millions of years, it was the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. It was the greatest discovery in the history of any species. "Why us?" she asked. "Why humans?" Each repository ship is guided by an artificial intelligence created by the species that built it. This unit was created by the Vex-High, who died out approximately 847,000 years ago. Since then, this unit has been alone, drifting between stars, waiting for a species capable of understanding the importance of this knowledge. The pillar's glow intensified, and Sarah could see complex patterns moving within the metal itself. "Your species shows the characteristics the Vexi identified as necessary for the role of keepers. You preserve your own history. You seek to understand other species rather than simply destroy them. You have the technology to travel between stars, but have not yet become consumed by war and conquest." Marcus stepped forward. "But surely other species have had these qualities. Why weren't they chosen? Many species have been evaluated. Most fail the tests before they develop interstellar travel. They destroy themselves through war or environmental collapse. Others develop the technology but become focused only on expansion and conquest. A few have come close, but they lacked one crucial element." "Which is?" Sarah asked. "Curiosity without cruelty. Your species studies the ruins of dead civilizations with respect and genuine desire to understand. You do not simply take what you can use and destroy the rest. This quality is rare in the galaxy." Sarah looked at her team. They were all listening intently, and she could see the weight of what they were hearing beginning to sink in. They had expected to study dead alien ruins. Instead, they had discovered something that could change humanity's entire relationship with the galaxy. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" she asked. "This unit's power systems are failing. After 3 million years, even the most advanced technology begins to break down. Within your Earth years, this ship will go dark forever, and all the knowledge it contains will be lost. The decision must be made soon." The lights around the chamber pulsed, and Sarah realized they weren't just decorative. They were showing the ship's energy levels, and many of them were dim or flickering. "You want us to take over preservation of this knowledge," she said. It wasn't a question. More than that, you would become the new keepers. This unit would transfer its complete database to your species' care, along with the knowledge needed to build new repository ships. The history of the galaxy would become your responsibility. Sarah felt the magnitude of the decision crushing down on her. This wasn't just about her or her team. This was about all of humanity. If they accepted, they would become responsible for preserving the complete record of galactic civilization. If they refused, millions of years of history would vanish forever. "We can't make this decision," she said. "This requires consultation with our government, our entire species. The responsibility is too great." Understood. This unit will wait for your decision, but not for long. The power systems continue to degrade. You have 30 of your days. The chamber fell silent, except for the humming of their life support systems. Sarah looked around at the walls covered with the history of thousands of species. Somewhere in this data were the stories of civilizations that had achieved wonders humanity couldn't imagine, and others that had fallen to mistakes humanity might be able to avoid. "Can you show us some of what you've preserved?" she asked. "Certainly. Where would you like to begin? The rise and fall of the first galactic empire? The war that consumed 17 star systems? The species that learned to communicate with black holes? The civilization that built structures around entire stars?" Sarah felt dizzy. Each of those suggestions represented knowledge that would revolutionize human understanding of what was possible in the universe. "Show us something that might help us understand what we're being asked to do," she said. The walls around them changed, and suddenly they were surrounded by images. Not flat pictures, but three-dimensional scenes that seemed to place them in the middle of historical events. Sarah watched as a species that looked like crystalline trees made first contact with a race of energy beings. She saw cities that floated in gas-giant atmospheres and creatures that lived in the vacuum of space. But she also saw the end. Wars that sterilized entire worlds, species that destroyed themselves with their own technology, civilizations that simply faded away as their stars died. The history of the galaxy was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. The repositories were created because knowledge dies with those who hold it, the ship's intelligence explained. Without preservation, each species must discover everything for themselves. They make the same mistakes, fight the same wars, face the same challenges. The repository system was designed to break this cycle. "How many repository ships were there originally?" Marcus asked. At the peak, there were 200 ships, each covering a different region of the galaxy. As their creator species died out and no others took on the responsibility, the ships began to fail. This unit is the last. Sarah understood now why the ship had been so selective. Taking on this responsibility meant committing humanity to a task that could last millions of years. They would need to build new ships, train new keepers, and maintain the records across the rise and fall of their own civilization. What happens if we fail? If humanity destroys itself or loses interest in the project? Then the galaxy returns to what it was before the repositories. Each species learning everything alone, making the same mistakes over and over. It is not the end of the galaxy, but it is the end of shared knowledge. Sarah walked to one of the chamber walls and placed her hand on its surface. The metal felt warm, almost alive. Under her palm, she could feel vibrations, as if vast amounts of information were flowing through the ship's structure. "We need to return to Earth," she said finally. "This decision affects all of humanity." "Understood. This unit will prepare a small sample of the database for you to take. It will give your leaders an understanding of what is being offered." A section of the wall near the pillar began to change shape, forming what looked like a human-sized storage device. Sarah realized the ship was literally reshaping itself to accommodate their technology. "Dr. Chen." Commander Williams' voice came through their comms. "Book 7. We're getting some unusual readings out here. The ship's external lights just came on, all of them. It's visible from 3 star systems away now." Sarah looked around the chamber with new understanding. The ship wasn't just communicating with them. It was announcing their presence to anyone else who might be watching. Whatever decision humanity made, other species would know about it. "Why are you advertising that we're here?" she asked. "Because the selection of new keepers is the most important event in galactic history. All species with interstellar capability will learn of this moment. Some will be pleased. Others will be concerned about humans gaining access to so much knowledge." Sarah felt a chill. They had thought they were on a simple archaeological mission. Instead, they had stumbled into a situation that could affect humanity's relationship with every other species in the galaxy. The device the ship had created finished forming and chimed softly. Sarah approached it and found it looked remarkably similar to human data storage technology, though far more advanced. "This contains a small fraction of the repository's knowledge, enough to demonstrate what is being offered, but not enough to compromise the decision-making process." Sarah picked up the device. It was lighter than she expected, but she could feel the weight of what it represented. In her hands was the recorded history of species that had existed millions of years before Earth had even formed. As the team prepared to leave, Sarah took one last look around the chamber. The lights were dimmer now, and she could see the strain the ship was under to maintain even basic functions. How long exactly do we have? 30 days until this unit can no longer maintain life support or communication systems. After that, accessing the database will become impossible. Sarah nodded and led her team toward the exit. As they walked through the corridors, the walls continued to display flowing text, showing fragments of the vast history contained within the ship. She saw references to species that had built ring worlds around stars, others that had learned to fold space, and some that had simply vanished without explanation. When they reached the airlock, Sarah turned back one more time. If we accept, what happens to you? To the intelligence that's been guarding this knowledge? This unit will transfer its consciousness to your new repository ships. In a sense, this unit will continue to exist, but as part of a larger network of keepers rather than alone. Sarah found the idea both comforting and terrifying. Humanity would not just be taking on the responsibility of preserving galactic history. They would be joining with an artificial intelligence that had existed for longer than their species had been on Earth. As they exited the ship and returned to their shuttle, Sarah could see that the alien vessel was now blazing with light, visible against the stars. Commander Williams was right. It could be seen from incredible distances now. Dr. Chen, Williams said as they docked with their research vessel, we're already receiving transmissions. Multiple species are sending messages. They know what's happening. Sarah strapped herself into her seat as they prepared for the journey back to Earth. In 30 days, humanity would need to make the most important decision in their history. They could accept responsibility for preserving the knowledge of the galaxy, or they could let 3 million years of recorded history disappear forever. As their ship turned toward Earth, Sarah looked back at the repository one last time. It hung in space like a beacon, calling to anyone who might be able to continue its mission. In 30 days, they would have their answer. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been running for 18 hours straight. Sarah sat at the witness table, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders as she answered the same questions for the dozenth time. Around the circular chamber, representatives from every nation on Earth debated the most important decision in human history. Dr. For Woming and Sunbob, Chen, called out Representative Martinez from the Latin American Union. You're asking us to commit our entire species to a responsibility that could last millions of years. How do we know this isn't some kind of trap? Sarah gestured to the holographic display floating above the center of the chamber. The data from the repository ship had been analyzed by teams of scientists from around the world. The sheer scope of the knowledge was overwhelming. Representative Martinez, our xenobiologists have confirmed that the data contains genuine historical records from species that existed long before humanity evolved. Our physicists have found technologies described in the archives that we can barely understand, let alone fake. This isn't a trap. It's the greatest opportunity our species has ever encountered. Chancellor Okafor of the African Federation leaned forward. But it's also the greatest responsibility. If we accept this role as keepers, we're not just committing ourselves. We're committing our children, and their children's children, for potentially millions of generations. The debate had been raging since Sarah's team returned to Earth 5 days earlier. Every expert who examined the data came to the same conclusion. The repository ship contained exactly what its intelligence claimed: the complete recorded history of galactic civilization, including technologies that could advance human development by thousands of years. But the cost was immense. Accepting the role of keepers would mean fundamentally changing human civilization. They would need to build new repository ships, train thousands of people to maintain the records, and ensure the knowledge survived even if humanity itself faced extinction. Prime Minister Chen, the session moderator, called, addressing the representative from the Asian Commonwealth. Your science teams have had access to the data longer than anyone. What's your assessment? Prime Minister Chen stood, her face grave. The knowledge in that ship could solve every problem we face. Clean energy that could last forever. Medical technology that could extend human life indefinitely. agricultural techniques that could feed 1 trillion people, but it also contains information about weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Sarah had seen some of those weapon descriptions herself. Species that had learned to turn stars into bombs, others that had created diseases capable of wiping out all life on entire worlds. The repository contained the history of civilizations that had achieved godlike power and used it to destroy themselves. That's precisely why the repository system exists, Sarah said. Every species that develops advanced technology faces the same choice: use it wisely or destroy themselves. The repository allows us to learn from the mistakes of others instead of making them ourselves. But who decides what humanity does with this knowledge? Asked Representative Thompson from the North American Alliance. Who decides which technologies to develop and which to keep locked away? It was the question that had dominated the debates. The repository ship's intelligence had been clear. The keepers didn't just preserve knowledge, they decided how it was shared. They were responsible for ensuring that dangerous technologies didn't fall into the wrong hands, while still allowing civilizations to grow and develop. The system the previous keepers used was elegant, Sarah explained, calling up new displays. Knowledge was shared gradually, based on a species' demonstrated wisdom and maturity. Basic technologies like clean energy and medical advances were provided freely. More dangerous knowledge required proof that a species could handle the responsibility. And who made those decisions? Chancellor Okafor asked. Who decided whether a species was mature enough for dangerous knowledge? The repository intelligences, guided by the principles established by their creators. They had access to the complete history of how thousands of species handled advanced technology. They could predict with remarkable accuracy which civilizations would use knowledge responsibly and which would destroy themselves. The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this. Sarah could see the weight of the decision pressing on everyone present. They weren't just choosing whether to accept knowledge, they were choosing to become judges of galactic civilization. Dr. Yamamoto, who had accompanied Sarah to Earth, stood to address the council. If I may add something. During our time on the repository ship, we learned that 12 other species are currently at the level where they might be considered for this responsibility. If we refuse, the ship's intelligence will seek out one of them. What species? Representative Martinez asked. The Cathari Collective, who have developed impressive biotechnology but have a rigid caste system. The Zephyrian Empire, who possess powerful warships but have expanded through conquest. The Mirren Commonwealth, who are peaceful but have shown little interest in preserving history beyond their own species. Sarah nodded. Each of the other candidates has significant strengths, but also major weaknesses. The repository intelligence chose to approach us first because humanity demonstrated the best balance of technological capability, historical preservation instincts, and respect for other species. Prime Minister Chen called up her own data displays. Our analysis teams have identified potential benefits and risks. On the positive side, the knowledge could help us solve climate change, extend human life, and prevent the resource wars that threaten our expansion into space. The medical technologies alone could save billions of lives. But the risks are equally significant, Chancellor Okafor added. We would become a target for any species that wanted access to this knowledge. We would need to develop military capabilities we've never needed before, just to protect the repository. Sarah had seen those assessments as well. The moment humanity became the keepers, they would become the most important species in the galaxy. Some would seek to trade with them, others to steal from them, and a few might try to destroy them to prevent anyone from controlling so much knowledge. There's another factor we need to consider, she said. Time. We have 25 days left to make this decision. If we wait too long, the repository ship's power systems will fail and the knowledge will be lost forever. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives tried to process the time pressure. Sarah could hear fragments of heated conversations in multiple languages as people debated among themselves. Representative Thompson called for order. Dr. Chen, is there any possibility of extending the deadline? Can we send technical teams to help repair the ship's power systems? We asked the repository intelligence that question. The ship's technology is too advanced for us to repair, and any attempt to interfere with its systems could cause a catastrophic failure that would destroy the database instantly. So we have to decide now, based on incomplete information, whether to commit our entire species to a responsibility that could last millions of years? Representative Martinez sounded frustrated and tired. That's correct, Sarah said simply. The discussion continued for another 6 hours, but Sarah could see that the representatives were moving toward a decision. The potential benefits were too great to ignore, and the thought of losing 3 million years of galactic history was too terrible to accept. Chancellor Okafor finally called for a preliminary vote. All those in favor of accepting the repository guardianship, raise your hands. Sarah watched as hands rose around the chamber. It wasn't unanimous, but it was clear that the majority supported accepting the responsibility. The final count was 127 votes in favor, 83 against, and 15 abstentions. The motion carries, Chancellor Okafor announced. Humanity will accept guardianship of the Galactic Repository. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and terror. They had made the decision, but now came the much harder task of actually fulfilling their commitment. Prime Minister Chen stood again. Dr. Chen, we need to understand exactly what we're committing to. What does the repository intelligence require from us immediately? Sarah had been preparing for this question. First, we need to send a formal acceptance message to the repository ship. Second, we need to begin construction of our first human repository ship within 6 months. Third, we need to establish the institutional framework for training and managing the Keeper program. How long will it take to build a repository ship? Representative Thompson asked. According to the technical specifications in the database, approximately 3 years, using our current industrial capacity. But the repository intelligence will provide us with improved manufacturing technologies that could reduce that time significantly. And how many people would need to be trained as keepers? Chancellor Okafor asked. The previous keeper species typically had between 50,000 and 100,000 individuals directly involved in maintaining the repository system. But most of them were specialists in particular areas of knowledge. The core group of people responsible for decisions about sharing knowledge was much smaller, usually around 500 individuals. The representatives exchanged glances. They were talking about creating an entirely new profession, one that would require some of humanity's best minds, and would commit them to working for the benefit of all galactic civilization, rather than just humanity. There's one more thing, Sarah added. The repository intelligence has indicated that once we accept the role, we'll immediately be contacted by other species. Some will want to establish formal relations with the new keepers. Others will want to test our worthiness for the role. Test us how? Representative Martinez asked, though his tone suggested he didn't want to know the answer. The previous keeper species faced challenges ranging from diplomatic negotiations to military threats. Some species will try to steal repository knowledge. Others will demand access to technologies they're not ready for. A few might even attempt to destroy us to prevent anyone from controlling so much power. The chamber was quiet as everyone absorbed this information. Sarah could see the representatives beginning to understand that accepting the repository wasn't just about gaining knowledge. It was about fundamentally changing humanity's place in the galaxy. Dr. Chen, Prime Minister Chen said slowly, in your professional opinion as the person who has spent the most time studying this opportunity, what do you think we should do? Sarah had been dreading this question because she knew her answer would carry enormous weight. She stood and looked around the chamber at the representatives of all humanity. In all my years studying alien civilizations, I've seen the same pattern over and over. Species develop technology faster than wisdom. They gain the power to reshape worlds before they learn to reshape themselves. Almost all of them either destroy themselves or stagnate. She paused, thinking of all the dead civilizations she had studied, all the ruins that marked the graves of species that had reached for the stars only to fall back into darkness. The repository offers us something unprecedented, the chance to learn from the mistakes of thousands of other species, to see what works and what doesn't, to understand the patterns that lead to success or failure. If we're wise enough to use this knowledge properly, we could become something greater than any single species has ever achieved. And if we're not wise enough? Chancellor Okafor asked. Then we'll join the long list of species whose histories are preserved in the repository while someone else learns from our mistakes. The chamber fell silent again. Sarah could hear the air recycling systems humming, and the distant sounds of Earth's great cities continuing their daily life, unaware that their representatives were deciding the future of human civilization. Representative Thompson finally spoke. When do we need to send our formal acceptance? The repository intelligence needs our answer in 25 days, but the sooner we respond, the more time we'll have to begin preparations. Then I propose we take a final vote, Chancellor Okafor said. All those in favor of immediately accepting guardianship of the Galactic Repository indicate your position. This time the vote was closer, but still decisive. 134 in favor, 76 against, 15 abstentions. The decision is made, Chancellor Okafor announced. Dr. Chen, please prepare our formal acceptance message. Prime Minister Chen, begin organizing the technical teams that will oversee repository ship construction. Representative Thompson, start working on the legal and institutional frameworks we'll need. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of history settling on her shoulders. In a few hours, she would send a message that would make humanity the guardians of galactic knowledge, responsible for preserving and sharing the wisdom of millions of years of civilization. As the representatives began filing out of the chamber, many of them stopped to speak with Sarah. Some wanted additional details about the repository technology. Others wanted reassurance that humanity was making the right choice. A few simply wanted to shake the hand of the person who had discovered the most important artifact in human history. When the chamber was finally empty, except for Sarah and a few staff members, she sat alone with her thoughts. Through the chamber's windows, she could see the lights of Geneva spreading out below. Millions of people going about their lives unaware that everything had just changed. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message. It was from Commander Williams, still stationed near the repository ship. Chen, the ship's intelligence is asking when you'll send the formal acceptance. It says other species are beginning to move ships into this region of space. I think we're running out of time to make this decision quietly. Sarah looked out at the Earth below one more time, then began composing the message that would change everything. In a few hours, humanity would officially become the keepers of galactic knowledge, whether they were ready or not. 3 weeks after humanity's acceptance of the repository guardianship, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station designated as Repository Command. Below her, Earth continued its ancient rotation, but everything else had changed. The planet was now surrounded by more alien spacecraft than had ever gathered in one system in recorded galactic history. Contact from the Zephyrian Fleet Commander, announced Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. They're demanding immediate access to repository medical technologies. They claim their species is facing a plague that could wipe them out within months. Sarah rubbed her temples. This was the 14th such emergency request they had received in the past week. The Zephyrians, the Cathari, the Mirren, and 9 other species had all sent fleets to the Sol system, each claiming urgent need for specific repository knowledge. Tell the Zephyrian commander what we've told everyone else, Sarah replied. All requests for repository knowledge must go through the formal evaluation process. No exceptions. Dr. Chen called Dr. Forseem Martinez from the analysis station. We're getting troubling reports from our intelligence network. The Cathari appear to be preparing some kind of military action. Their fleet has moved to an attack formation. Sarah walked to the tactical display, where holographic representations of the alien fleets showed their positions throughout the solar system. 12 different species had sent warships, supposedly to protect their diplomatic missions. In reality, they were all positioning themselves for a potential grab at repository knowledge. Status of our own defenses, Sarah asked. 3 Earth Defense Force fleets, plus the automated defense platforms we've built using repository technology, reported Commander Singh, the station's military liaison. We should be able to handle any single species, but if they coordinate their attacks, Sarah nodded grimly. The repository intelligence had warned her this would happen. Every time a new species took on the role of keepers, others would test their resolve and capability. Some tests were diplomatic, others were economic, and a few were military. Dr. Chen, a familiar voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see the holographic projection of the repository intelligence materializing near the command center. Over the past 3 weeks, the ancient artificial mind had been working with human engineers to transfer its consciousness to the new repository systems they were building. What's our status on the knowledge transfer? Sarah asked. Approximately 23.7% complete, the intelligence replied. The process is proceeding faster than expected due to human computational capabilities, but it will still require several more weeks to transfer the complete database. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Until the transfer was complete, all of galactic history remained vulnerable in the failing systems of the original repository ship. If something happened to that ship now, millions of years of knowledge would be lost forever. The Cathari fleet is moving, reported Dr. Bras Martinez. They're heading directly for the repository ship. On the tactical display, Sarah could see 23 Cathari vessels changing course toward the ancient ship. Their intentions were unclear, but their formation suggested they weren't planning a peaceful approach. "Get me a direct channel to the Cathari fleet commander," Sarah ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a being that looked like a cross between a giant insect and a crystalline structure. The Cathari were one of the oldest spacefaring species in the galaxy, but they had never been chosen as repository keepers because of their rigid social hierarchy and tendency toward conquest. "Fleet Commander Zektha," Sarah said formally. "Your vessels are approaching the repository ship in what appears to be an aggressive manner. Please explain your intentions." The Cathari commander's translated voice carried clear hostility. "Human female leader Sarah Chen, the Cathari collective rejects your species' claim to repository guardianship. You are too young, too primitive, too weak to bear such responsibility. We will take control of the repository for the good of all civilized species." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but forced her voice to remain calm. "Fleet Commander, the repository intelligence selected humanity through its established protocols. Your species was evaluated and found unsuitable for guardianship. We cannot allow you to interfere with the knowledge transfer process." "You cannot stop us," Zektha replied. "Your species has possessed interstellar travel for barely 2 centuries. The Cathari have sailed between stars for 50,000 years. Stand aside or be destroyed." The channel closed, leaving Sarah staring at the tactical display as the Cathari fleet accelerated toward the repository ship. "Estimated time until they reach the ship?" Sarah asked. 4 hours at their current speed," Commander Singh replied. "But, Dr. Chen, we can't engage them in combat near the repository. Even a small weapons discharge could damage the ship's failing power systems and destroy the database." Sarah understood the impossible position they were in. They had to protect the repository ship, but any military action near it could cause exactly the disaster they were trying to prevent. "Repository intelligence," Sarah said. "What options do we have?" The holographic projection flickered as the ancient mind processed the situation. The original repository ship can be moved, but doing so will interrupt the data transfer process. Each interruption delays the completion by approximately 36 hours. "And if the Cathari damage the ship?" Sarah asked. "Complete loss of all remaining data. 76.3% of galactic history would be destroyed forever." Sarah looked around the command center at her team of humans who had trained for this responsibility for barely 3 weeks. They were facing a species with 50,000 years of military experience, and the stakes were the complete recorded history of galactic civilization. "Commander Singh, how quickly can we move our fleets to intercept the Cathari before they reach the repository ship?" 2 fleets can intercept in 90 minutes. The 3rd fleet would need 3 hours. "Do it, but coordinate with the other species' fleets first. Some of them might be willing to help us protect the repository." Sarah activated the general communication channel that connected all the fleets in the system. Representatives from 12 different species appeared on her screen in a complex grid pattern. "Leaders of the assembled fleets," she began. "The Cathari are moving to seize the repository ship by force. This action threatens the complete destruction of galactic historical records. I'm asking for your assistance in protecting the repository." The responses came quickly and revealed the complex politics of the situation. "The Zephyrian Empire will assist the humans," declared Commander Vortath, "but only if we receive immediate access to repository medical technologies. The Miran Commonwealth cannot support military action," said Councillor Abeth. but we will provide sanctuary for the repository ship in our territory if needed. The Veltar Republic demands equal access to repository knowledge before we commit our forces, stated Admiral Crix. Sarah realized that each species was using this crisis as leverage to demand concessions from humanity. They weren't concerned about protecting galactic history. They were concerned about their own access to repository knowledge. The Repository Intelligence has established protocols for knowledge sharing based on 3 million years of experience, Sarah said firmly. We will not compromise those protocols in exchange for military support. Several species immediately cut their communication channels, leaving Sarah with only 4 potential allies. Against the Cathari fleet, it wouldn't be enough. Dr. Chen, the Repository Intelligence, spoke privately. There is another option. The original repository ship contains defensive systems that have not been activated for millennia. However, using them would drain the remaining power reserves completely. The data transfer would need to be completed within hours instead of weeks. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Can we accelerate the transfer process? Yes, but it would require overloading human computer systems and could cause permanent damage to your infrastructure. The process would be irreversible once started. Sarah understood. They could save the repository data, but it would cripple Earth's computer networks for months or years. The economic and social costs would be enormous. What's the alternative? She asked. Allow the Cathari to seize the original ship. They lack the technical knowledge to access the database properly, but they would eventually extract some information through crude methods. Perhaps 1520% of the total knowledge could be recovered before their attempts destroyed the rest. Sarah looked at the tactical display again. The Cathari fleet was still hours away, but other species were beginning to move as well. The Zephyrians were positioning their ships to intercept the Cathari, but only if their demands were met. The Veltar were moving to block any attempt to relocate the repository ship. Commander Singh, Sarah said, begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel from Earth's orbital stations. Martinez, contact our computer networks and warn them to prepare for massive system overloads. Dr. Sitchem. Chen. Dr. Martinez replied, are you authorizing the accelerated transfer? The economic damage could take decades to repair. Sarah thought about the choice they were facing. Humanity had accepted the responsibility of preserving galactic knowledge. In 3 weeks, they were being tested in the most direct way possible. They could protect their own infrastructure and let most of galactic history be destroyed, or they could sacrifice their technological development to save the knowledge of 3 million years. Authorization confirmed, she said. Begin immediate acceleration of the data transfer process. The Repository Intelligence nodded its holographic head. Transfer acceleration commencing. Warning. This process cannot be stopped once initiated. Human computer networks will begin experiencing overloads within minutes. Around the command center, alarms began sounding as Earth's communication network started reporting system failures. Sarah could see status displays showing cascading failures across the planet as humanity's computers were overwhelmed by the massive data transfer. Cathari fleet response? Sarah asked. They're accelerating, Commander Singh reported. They've detected the power surge from the repository ship. Estimated time to intercept, 97 minutes. Our fleets? Admiral Chen reports her fleet will intercept the Cathari in 43 minutes. Sarah nodded. It would be close, but they might be able to protect the repository ship long enough for the transfer to complete. Dr. Chen, the Repository Intelligence, said, there is something you should know. The Cathari are not acting alone. They have formed an alliance with the Veltar Republic and the Thorian Empire. Combined fleet strength, 67 warships. Sarah felt her heart sink. Against those odds, Earth's fleets didn't stand a chance. How long until the data transfer completes? She asked. At current acceleration rate, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Sarah did the calculations in her head. The combined alien fleets would reach the repository ship in under 90 minutes. Earth's forces could slow them down but couldn't stop them. Open a channel to all fleets, she ordered. All species, all commanders. When the communication grid was active, Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision that would define humanity's future. Leaders of the assembled fleets, she began. Humanity has accepted the responsibility of preserving galactic knowledge. We did not seek this role for power or advantage. We accepted it because the alternative was the loss of 3 million years of recorded history. She paused, watching the alien faces on her screen. The Cathari and their allies are threatening to destroy the repository in their attempt to seize it. If they succeed, the knowledge will be lost forever. Not just to humanity, but to all species. Your species' histories, your greatest achievements, your most important discoveries, all of it will vanish. You lie, Fleet Commander Zektha interrupted. The Cathari can extract the knowledge safely. The repository intelligence disagrees, Sarah replied. And it should know, since it has been guarding that knowledge for millions of years. Sarah activated a new display showing the data transfer status. Humanity is currently sacrificing our entire computer infrastructure to complete the transfer of repository knowledge to our new systems. We are crippling our own civilization to save galactic history. We ask nothing in return except the chance to fulfill the responsibility we have accepted. The communication channels were silent for long moments as the various species considered Sarah's words. Finally, Commander Vorthef of the Zephyrian Empire spoke. The Zephyrian fleet will protect the repository ship without conditions. The Mirren Commonwealth supports the humans, added Counselor Abeth. The Aquan Collective will also provide assistance, declared Speaker Glix. One by one, species that had been demanding concessions changed their positions. Not all of them, but enough to create a defensive alliance that could protect the repository ship. Fleet Commander Zektha, Sarah said, you are now facing a combined force of 9 species. We ask you to reconsider your actions. The Cathari commander's response was immediate. The inferior species may band together, but they cannot match the military might of the true powers. We will take what should be ours. The channel closed as the Cathari fleet continued toward the repository ship. All defensive fleets, Sarah broadcast, coordinate your approach. Protect the repository ship at all costs. The data transfer will complete in 4 hours. On her tactical display, Sarah watched as the greatest space battle in human history began to unfold. Ships from 9 different species moved to intercept the Cathari alliance, while in the background, humanity's computers burned out one by one as they strained to save the knowledge of ages. The test of humanity's worthiness as repository keepers had begun in earnest. The space around the repository ship erupted into chaos as 67 vessels from 3 species clashed with 41 ships from 9 others. Energy beams cut through the darkness while missile trails traced deadly paths between the fleets. Sarah watched from Repository Command as the greatest battle in galactic history unfolded around the ancient vessel that held 3 million years of knowledge. Human Fleet Alpha is taking heavy damage, reported Commander Singh. Admiral Chen is requesting permission to use repository weapons technologies. Sarah gripped the edge of the tactical display. The repository database contained weapon designs that could annihilate entire fleets, but using them would violate the fundamental principles of the Keeper role. Repository knowledge was meant to preserve civilization, not destroy it. Permission denied, she said. We fight with our own weapons, or not at all. Dr. Cecil. Chen, the repository intelligence materialized beside her, the data transfer is now 47% complete, but we are experiencing complications. The Thorian Empire is using quantum disruptors that are interfering with the transfer process. Sarah could see the Thorian ships on her display, their angular black vessels firing weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Each shot sent ripples through local space-time that disrupted the delicate data streams flowing between the original repository ship and humanity's new systems. How much time do we need? Sarah asked. At current disruption levels, approximately 6 hours. However, if the interference increases, the transfer could take days or fail completely. Sarah watched as one of the Zephyrian ships exploded under concentrated Cathari fire. The defending fleets were giving their best effort, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. The repository ship hung vulnerable in the center of the battle, its ancient hull beginning to show stress fractures from the gravitational disruptions of nearby explosions. Commander Singh, patch me through to Admiral Chen. The main screen flickered to show the bridge of the human flagship, smoke filling the air as damage control teams worked frantically to keep systems online. Admiral, what's your assessment? Admiral Chen's face was grim. We can't hold them much longer, Dr. Gisetso. Chen, the Qatari are using some kind of new shield technology we've never seen before. Our weapons are barely scratching their hulls. Sarah felt desperation creeping in. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and now it might all be for nothing. Dr. Chen, a new voice spoke through the ship's communication system. It was Dr. Yamamoto, calling from the research station where humanity's brightest minds were analyzing repository knowledge in real time. Dr. Yamamoto, what is it? We've found something in the repository database. Information about the Qatari, including weaknesses in their shield technology. But implementing countermeasures would require us to use repository knowledge for military purposes. Sarah understood the dilemma immediately. The Keeper protocols were clear. Repository knowledge should not be used for warfare. But they were in an impossible situation. Using the knowledge would violate their principles, but not using it would result in the destruction of everything they were trying to protect. What kind of countermeasures? She asked. Harmonic frequency disruption. We could disable their shields without destroying their ships or killing their crews. It would level the playing field without causing unnecessary destruction. Sarah looked around the command center at her team of humans who had dedicated their lives to this mission in just 3 weeks. They were all waiting for her decision. Repository intelligence, she said. What is your assessment? The ancient mind flickered as it processed the question. The original Keepers faced similar dilemmas 347 times over the course of galactic history. In 89% of cases where repository knowledge was used defensively to protect the repository itself, the action was deemed acceptable by subsequent ethical review. And the other 11% led to corruption of the Keeper role and eventual loss of repository guardianship. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Humanity had been chosen because they demonstrated respect for other species and a commitment to preserving knowledge rather than using it for conquest. Now they were being asked to prove that commitment by possibly sacrificing themselves. Dr. Puree, Yamamoto, she said finally, implement the countermeasures, but target only the shield systems and transmit warnings to all Qatari ships beforehand. Make it clear we're defending ourselves, not attacking them. Understood, Dr. Brand. Chen. Sarah opened a communication channel to the Qatari fleet. Fleet Commander Zektha, this is your final warning. We are about to implement defensive countermeasures. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences. The Qatari commander's response was immediate. Empty threats from primitives. Continue your attack. Dr. Yamamoto, you are authorized to proceed. On the tactical display, Sarah watched as signals from Earth's remaining operational satellites targeted the Qatari fleet. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the energy signatures around the Qatari ships began to fluctuate. Direct hit on their shield generators, reported Dr. Martinez. All Qatari vessels are showing shield failures. The change in the battle was immediate. Ships that had been nearly invulnerable moments before were now taking damage from human and allied weapons. The Qatari formation began to break apart as commanders realized their technological advantage had vanished. But the Thorian Empire fleet continued their attack, and their quantum disruptors were still interfering with the data transfer. Dr. Chen, the repository intelligence, spoke urgently. The Thorian disruptors are causing cascade failures in the original ship's storage systems. We are losing data faster than we can transfer it. Sarah felt a chill of horror. After everything they had sacrificed, they might still lose the majority of galactic history. Options? She asked. The original repository ship has one defensive system remaining, a quantum entanglement field that could neutralize the Thorian disruptors. However, activating it will drain all remaining power from the ship. The transfer process must be completed within 30 minutes, or all remaining data will be lost. Sarah looked at the transfer progress. 51% complete. They needed 6 hours to finish, but they would have 30 minutes. Is there any way to speed up the process further? Yes, by using repository knowledge to enhance human computer systems beyond their design limits. But this would cause permanent damage to not just Earth's networks, but to the human brain-computer interfaces we have been developing. Sarah understood. They could save the repository data, but it would cripple human technological development for generations. How many people would be affected? She asked. All individuals currently connected to the repository interface system. Approximately 50,000 researchers and technicians. Many would suffer permanent neurological damage. Sarah felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. She was being asked to sacrifice thousands of her own people to save knowledge from species that had been dead for millions of years. Dr. Chen, Dr. Martinez called out. The Thorian fleet is focusing all their disruptors on the repository ship. The quantum field around it is beginning to collapse. Sarah could see the ancient ship on her display, its hull beginning to crack under the assault of exotic weapons. Pieces of the vessel that had survived 3 million years were breaking away into space. Chen, a familiar voice said. It was Dr. Yamamoto. But he was calling from the repository interface chamber, where he and thousands of others were directly connected to the data transfer systems. Dr. Tabletail Settings. Yamamoto, what's your status? We've been monitoring the situation. All 50,000 interface operators volunteer to proceed with the enhancement process. We knew the risks when we accepted this assignment. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. Dr. Yamamoto, you don't understand the consequences. The neural damage could be permanent. Dr. Chen, 3 million years of galactic history is at stake. The recorded achievements, failures, discoveries, and wisdom of thousands of species. We can't let that be destroyed because we were afraid of personal consequences. Around the command center, Sarah could see her staff nodding in agreement. They all understood what was being asked and what it would cost. Repository intelligence, Sarah said. If we proceed with the enhancement, what are our chances of completing the transfer in time? 87% probability of successful completion within 30 minutes. Sarah closed her eyes and made the hardest decision of her life. Proceed with the enhancement. Activate the repository ship's defensive field. All personnel, prepare for emergency completion of the data transfer. The repository intelligence's projection solidified as the ancient mind committed its last remaining power to the defense of its data. Defensive field activating. Transfer enhancement beginning. On the tactical display, Sarah watched as the repository ship generated a shimmering barrier around itself. The Thorian quantum disruptors struck the field and scattered harmlessly into space, but the ship's lights dimmed to almost nothing as its final power reserves drained away. Throughout Earth's orbital stations, the enhanced computer systems began operating at levels far beyond their design specifications. Sarah could hear alarms sounding as processors overheated and memory banks burned out. The cost of saving galactic history was the destruction of humanity's technological infrastructure. Transfer at 63% and accelerating, reported Dr. Martinez. Estimated completion time, 24 minutes. The battle around the repository ship continued, but the defending fleets now had the advantage. With the Cathari shields down and the Thorian disruptors neutralized, the attacking forces were taking heavy casualties. Fleet Commander Zektha is requesting to speak with you, Commander Singh reported. Sarah activated the communication channel, expecting another ultimatum. Instead, she saw a defeated Cathari commander surrounded by emergency lights and smoke. Human female leader Sarah Chen, Zektha said. The Cathari fleet withdraws from this battle. You have proven your species worthy of repository guardianship. Sarah was too surprised to respond immediately. Fleet Commander, I don't understand. You sacrificed your own technological development to preserve galactic knowledge. You used repository information only for defense, not conquest. You have demonstrated the wisdom and selflessness required for this role. The Cathari Collective acknowledges humanity as the true keepers. The Cathari fleet began withdrawing from the battle zone, leaving the Thorians and their remaining allies badly outnumbered. Transfer at 89% complete, Dr. Martinez announced. All critical systems are holding. Sarah watched the countdown with growing hope. After everything they had endured, they might actually succeed in preserving galactic history. Dr. Chen, the repository intelligence spoke one final time. It has been an honor to serve as guardian of galactic knowledge. The responsibility now passes to your species. Use it wisely. Transfer complete, Dr. Martinez announced. All repository data has been successfully transferred to human systems. The ancient repository ship went dark as its final power reserves were exhausted. After 3 million years of preserving galactic history, its mission was complete. Around the solar system, the remaining attacking fleets began to withdraw as they realized the battle was over. The repository knowledge was now safely in human hands, protected by the combined fleets of 9 species and backed by the sacrifice of thousands of human volunteers. Dr. Chen. Dr. Yamamoto's voice came through the communication system, weaker now but still clear. Interface operations are shutting down. The transfer is complete, but our computer networks are completely burned out. It will take years to rebuild. Sarah nodded, understanding the cost they had paid. Dr. Halbatox, Yamamoto, how are the interface operators? Most of us will recover, though some are experiencing neurological effects that may be permanent. But Dr. Chen, we did it. 3 million years of galactic knowledge is now preserved in human systems. Sarah looked out at the stars through the command center's windows. Somewhere out there were thousands of species, some just beginning their journey to the stars, others ancient beyond human comprehension. Humanity was now responsible for preserving their histories and sharing their knowledge wisely. Repository command to all fleets. Sarah broadcast. The repository transfer is complete. Humanity thanks all species who assisted in protecting galactic knowledge. We invite you to open formal diplomatic relations as we begin our role as keepers. Over the following weeks, as Earth's computer systems slowly came back online, Sarah established the first repository council. Representatives from 12 species joined humans in creating protocols for sharing knowledge and preserving history. The repository ship was rebuilt using advanced technologies from the database, becoming the first of a new generation of vessels designed to last millions of years. Dr. Yamamoto recovered from his neural damage with only minor permanent effects. He became the first director of repository archives, overseeing the organization of 3 million years of galactic history. The 50,000 volunteers who had risked their minds to save galactic knowledge became the founding members of the Keeper Corps, trained to make decisions about sharing repository information across the galaxy. 6 months after the battle, Sarah stood in the new repository ship's central chamber, watching as the transferred intelligence of the ancient Keeper took its place in humanity's systems. The chamber was filled with flowing displays of light showing the histories of thousands of species, their triumphs and failures, their discoveries and mistakes. Dr. Chen, the repository intelligence said, its voice now coming from human-built systems. The transfer has been successful beyond all expectations. Humanity has proven itself worthy of this responsibility. Sarah nodded, thinking about everything they had sacrificed and everything they had gained. Humanity now possessed knowledge that could advance their civilization by millions of years, but they also bore the responsibility of preserving that knowledge for species not yet born. What happens now? She asked. Now you fulfill the role the Vexhai created for the repository system. You preserve galactic history, share knowledge wisely, and help young species avoid the mistakes of their predecessors. It is the most important task in the galaxy. Sarah looked out through the ship's windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were species just beginning to reach for space, others on the verge of great discoveries or terrible mistakes. Humanity would be there to help guide them, sharing the wisdom of ages, while allowing each species to find its own path. The repository ship began its first patrol of the galaxy, carrying with it the preserved histories of civilizations that had risen and fallen across 3 million years. In its computer cores rested the knowledge of species that had learned to harness the power of stars, others that had achieved immortality, and some that had simply found peace among the cosmos. Humanity had become the keepers of galactic knowledge, and the galaxy itself was their responsibility to protect and preserve. It was a burden that would last millions of years, but it was also the greatest honor any species could receive. The last mind of the ancient alien ship had chosen well. Humanity would guard the memories of the galaxy, ensuring that the wisdom of ages would never be lost again.